And we are live. Okay, everyone wants to start a business. That's not true. Not everyone wants to start a business. But in entrepreneurship, one of the first things that you learn is that there's a difference between being an entrepreneur and being just a small business owner. And amongst those differences is that a small business owner loves what they do and they purchase themselves a job. They create something for them to work inside of, versus an entrepreneur is someone who learns to love what it takes to win, and their objective is a larger impact for themselves and through the work that they're doing. And the other detail is that entrepreneurs are willing to take the additional risk necessary to create the impact they're trying to do, which means they also get the additional reward. That's why I'm super excited today to have our guest on the show. So welcome to Amplify Your Impact. If you haven't been here before, this is a show for entrepreneurs who are out to change the world with their purpose-driven businesses, but they also have a focus on increasing their personal wealth and balancing their personal health along the way. Here's our show's warning. Real life entrepreneurship is raw, so is the show. We record it live. It's unedited, unfiltered. So activate your mula bandha and let's get going here. I'm Josh Biro, today's host, and the person on the podcast today, Ms. Nina Granatir, is someone you must know because, Nina, I think that you have a brilliant entrepreneurial and also woman entrepreneurial story that you've really done yourself. A real arc of I was just a yoga teacher and then going through, we're going to get to in a second, growth as an entrepreneur. And for those of you who don't know, Nina is our newest coach at the Yogapreneur Collective as well. Nina, welcome to the show. I'm really happy to have you on.
Thanks. I'm so happy to hang out, and anytime we can rap about anything.
Anytime we can rap, let's rap. All right. Nina, where are you located right now?
Right now I'm in Miami Beach. In my apartment.
Heck yeah, that's a good place for rapping as well.
Oh, it's so nice.
Miami style rap is, the best. Okay, let's get right into it. We always start with a random ass question that I don't know, we pull from a hat kind of thing. I kind of cheated on yours because I knew what was going to happen. So the question is, how do you decide on the style of glasses that you wear?
Well, I'm kind of new to the glasses game, and I got to say that this business, I'm over it. I think I need contact. I'm going to try contacts. But in terms of frames, I mean, these were like $20 readers. I spent $300 on some progressives, hated them. I mean, I can't, how far down this route to go?
I'm just curious if there's a formula,
These were $20. I got them at the airport, and they get the most compliments. People like them. They're a crowd pleaser.
There you go.
We say. So I'm rocking with these, but they need to get stronger. And also this game, it's so it's blurry.
All right. Lesson of today. There's your first takeaway. If you need to pick out glasses, just grab the $25 pair at the airport because they're just as good as anything else anyways.
Right,
all right. Well, now that we've got that out of the way, your glasses are something that come up because people do comment on them. Like, oh yeah, what's the coach? She's got the glasses. And I'm like, oh Nina.
Really?
Yeah, I have it a couple times.
I didn't know people were noticing, but okay. Yeah.
All right. I want to just jump right into the meat of it. Our sort of anchor question is, hence the name of the podcast, Amplify Your Impact. What's the world impact that inspires you? And I know we're going right for it. What's the ripple effect you're trying to create? Is there one? What's your dharma? What, however you want to word it? What?
Yeah. No.
What is that?
No big deal.
Yeah. No big deal. Nonchalant. Yeah.
Right. Why are you here on the planet? It has to do with, I really appreciate this question. I'd love to do some journaling about it, actually.
Let me come back in 2 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But okay. Two things are coming. Many years ago, I started working with a coach, like a business and life coach. And one of his approaches, he does this with everyone that he starts working with, is to identify your calling. It could be called a dharma, and a purpose. And it's the way that he summarizes it is it's that, what do you want people to say about you, basically, at your funeral?
Yeah.
And it has to be something that lights you up, as well as impacting the world at large. And so what I came up with years ago is all beings are free. Let me say it like it's not a question. All beings are free.
Are free?
Right?
Free? Yeah.
Um, period. And so, and that involves a few things for me. That involves being seen. I'm really that's a value that I have, of having folks when they're in my space feel seen and acknowledged. I think it also makes a big difference in a yoga studio.
Yeah.
And that there's a way of like just a freedom to be who you are.
I love
So
it.
yeah.
I think this ties into so many things that I'm sure we're going to get into talking today. But the first thing that came to mind was there's a book by Guy Hendricks, something Hendricks,
That sounds familiar.
The Big Leap, it's called. But it talks about like there's these different zones that you work in, and there's a couple other books to talk about this too. But you know, there's the idea of like your zone of incompetence. Like these are things that you suck at, you're not good at, you don't like them. You really shouldn't be doing them because there's no reason for you to be doing them.
Right. You're never going to get
There's
good.
right. There's your zone of competence. It's like you can adequately do it, but you don't like it, and someone else can definitely do it better.
Right.
There's your zone of excellence. This is where this is the big takeaway from the book for me. These
Yeah.
are things that you do extremely well. You're highly capable,
Mm-hmm.
but you're not inspired by them, and they don't take you to your fullest potential. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's your zone of genius, and that's where it's like you're excellent at it, and you'll know that you're working there because it's not work anymore. Like you just get caught up in the thing you're doing.
Right. 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 That's right.
Um,
That's right.
yeah. So that was just what we were just saying was triggering, like finding that zone of genius and
Right.
inspiring people, like being there yourself, but then inspiring people to be there too. I feel like requires an element of authenticity and your words, like really owning and being who you are, being free to be yourself. It's a huge subject right now, I think, in the world.
Totally.
How do you see that play out? Like, I guess just in general in life with friends, family, whatever, but also obviously as a business coach, how do you see that play out in businesses? Like when you talk with owners or
Mm-hmm.
yoga teachers or other entrepreneurs that you know, how are they showing up authentically as themselves and like really being themselves or not? What are you sort of seeing?
Right. Right. Well, and I love that framework from Guy Hendricks, or maybe that's not his name, but no, I mean, just like brass tacks, if it's not lighting you up, don't do it.
What are you
You know,
doing? Yeah.
hire out. I mean, that was one of the best things that
Mm,
I did. People ask, sometimes people ask me like, how did I get so successful? I mean, in my small business, which is there's a lot of different things that happen, but one of the things I did right away was I hired people who could do the thing better than I could.
mm,
And yeah, like I
I
can
like
learn,
it.
I could try and learn QuickBooks, and I actually did, for example. Um, and it's like, but or I can hire out for that job.
Yeah, like why not have a specialist who's
Right.
absolutely the best at
Yeah.
QuickBooks doing it?
Yeah. Right. And I think some yoga studio owners get stuck and think that they have to do everything. And
Mm,
that can include being there all the time. And actually, as you distinguished earlier, that means that you've just bought yourself a job and a lot of headache. So
yeah.
I think real leaders inspire leaders, create leaders.
Mm,
And so, and I think that's what we're up to in yoga studio ownership is leadership development, both our own and in developing others we get developed. But like give the thing away, like as much as
yeah.
I think
I
that's
like
more fun.
I really like what you're saying. Real leaders create leaders. I just wrote down. Taking some notes as we go here too.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that that's true. It's like if you're really leading somebody, you're not better than them. You're not hiring people to do stuff for you under you. You're rather calling them up to be the best version of themselves, and then you're leveraging that towards a common outcome or goal.
Right.
Yeah,
Totally.
that, you know, I want to go back to the hiring thing. A really interesting detail that I've been using a lot talking in my coaching as well is the concept of hiring people who are very excellent at what they do and keeping that in balance with the other practicalities of business, like what can you actually pay someone in the business realistically?
Right.
How do you
Right.
find that person? But then also, you know, how do you make sure that you are hiring someone good? So one of the details I've been commenting on is like, if you look at any market, and I would say this is true in most boutique fitness and wellness, but actually where I see this obviously a ton is getting to be behind the scenes on these tech companies the last few years.
Yeah.
The difference between a company that's like a total fucking rock star of a company and super fast moving or whatever else is they have better A players.
Mm.
And then the question becomes, how do you get an A player? And on average, there's some data now coming out that to get like the best person at the thing, whatever the thing is, you are probably going to pay on average 20 to 25% above market value for the position, which sounds like a lot. But then if you look at the output of an A player, it's not 25% more. It's like double or triple as good as a low tier person in the same job. So
Right.
that's a good trade. um,
Wow.
so
Wow. That's
from that thought, I'm curious about what you're saying, like being a real leader, creating leaders, and then hiring people that are just better at the thing than you. Like, how do you do that, or how did you do that? Like, how did you make the decision one day? I want to get to your story in a second here too, but like, how did you make the decision? I need to hire someone for this, QuickBooks or whatever, and this is what I'm looking for, and how I know that they're better than me. Like, practically, what did you do?
practically sat down and tried to do the thing myself and realized quickly that I suck at this. And I've just never been afraid to ask for help. So
Yeah.
go to my network. I mean, they call me Nina the networker. It's kind of like a jingle. Go to my network and just at like, yo, who has an accountant? Who has a bookkeeper? Send them my way.
Mm,
Just
yeah.
ask for help and got the help. And that saved me so much money. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and sanity.
Man, recommendations just count for so much, so much weight. I'm just thinking about like I'm in an entrepreneurial group with a bunch of dudes. I've been for a few years. We chat once
Uh-huh.
a month. They're all cool. Like I like them or buddies or whatever. But one of the most valuable things about that group is how expansive my network has become. Because the same
Mm,
thing, I'm like, I need someone who does this, and they're like, I got a guy. Like they've already done the effort to find the person.
totally.
So now, you know, it's almost a little incestuous. We all use the same couple people for
Right.
certain things in
Right.
business, but it's
Right.
like these are trusted sources for it, right?
That's
So
that's right. As we do in the YC.
right, exactly. I just had yoga lawyer Corey was actually here
Yeah.
staying with me, and we were
Uh-huh.
working a little bit on his business.
Uh-huh.
But like if someone says anything about legal documentation or legal help or whatever else, like no one else even exists in my mind if you're a yoga studio. That's who you go to because he's the best at it and he's a trusted source and etc. Is there someone else out there that's good? Probably, but like why go find them if you already got someone? So
Exactly.
all right, let me back us up. Superhero origin story. You're a yoga business coach. I know that you've, you know, obviously owned a studio, but take me back to opening a yoga studio and sort of that journey. How did we get to become Nina the networker slash yoga business
Mhm.
coach?
Right. Well, I sometimes say if I knew what it was going to take, I may not have done it,
Yeah, totally.
you know.
Totally.
Because I really like most studio owners, I went in because of a passion and like
Mm,
gravity, like kind of just pulling me forward. Like there was kind of like no choice is how it felt. Um, and I didn't have business experience. I had taught yoga, then I managed several studios. So it's not like I had zero experience. Um, but as we know, teaching, managing, and then owning a studio, these are all distinct phases of
yeah.
entrepreneurship. They're completely different and there's some overlap.
Sorry, just to interject,
Yeah.
tell me a little bit more about that because we see this all the time, and even today, I was on a coaching call with someone, like a free coaching call just to see if we could help them.
Yeah.
And they had spent their total training for
Mhm.
being all the different types of yoga teachers they were or whatever.
Right. Right.
Their total training, they had spent like, we made the calculation, like $80,000 over the last decade. Like they did like every major name training you could think of. They're
Wow.
hyper trained, which
Yeah.
is cool. But then we were like, cool. So like how many hours of that was on how to run a yoga business?
Right. Hmm.
And their words, not mine. They're like collectively, I don't know, 1 hour. So we were like, holy
Right.
shit. But still they open a yoga studio. So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
talk to me a little bit
Hmm.
about that, like just being pulled forward, called to open it, regardless of that.
Yeah. I mean, it's a passion for the practice and wanting to share it.
Mm,
And it made sense as like just intuitively like, okay, this is the next step. Um, and at that time, that was 2010 when I signed my lease. So things were a little different then. Just rents were cheaper, and Bikram yoga, I opened as a Bikram yoga studio and later rebranded. But that was still really, really hot, not to be punny, but um there was we were all so flush, um
mm,
and and while that's true, there were still many, many steps that were to come that I could not have foreseen. I really couldn't have foreseen what was to
well,
all
keep
out of
us
that.
keep us going then. So,
Yeah.
passion for the practice,
Right.
passion for I'm reading between the lines here, like helping people,
Uh-huh.
making a life for yourself. Like that's how
Yeah,
you get there.
I didn't go in to make money. I didn't have any. That wasn't even a consideration.
Right.
Not even a consideration. Actually, the year before, was it the year? No, I had been managing the year before, but a few years before, when I was solely teaching yoga, I remember telling someone, so I know it's true, that I made $14,000 that year. And I was fine. I was great. I lived I was in my 20s and I lived in a group house and I taught yoga and I ate brown rice and beans. And it was like, it was not, there was nothing that I needed. It was fine. I was totally happy.
I
Um,
love it.
yeah, so I really did not, it was not a consideration, truly. I crowd funded with my own community. I borrowed money for my
Oh,
family.
really?
Hmm.
Like from your family sort of thing, or like actual community?
Yeah, for my family and friends.
Mm.
I did actually, I don't know if we want to talk about this part, but I did start out with a business owner. I mean, a business partner. It's part of the
Yeah, of
story.
course.
It is what happened.
Give us the
Um,
goods, dude.
yeah, yeah. And that it is kind of an interesting piece, because she approached me. I was already kind of like looking for looking for places. And we had taught together at a previous studio, and she was older than I, and like in her 50s. I was, I think, 30 or so. And her husband invented Xbox, so they had a lot of resources. And
Mm.
she asked if I would like to partner with her, and it was like this unconscious, this is fucking scary. And like to have her, um to have her bringing half the cash and also like half the energy felt inspiring. And so I was a yes. So we started out together as partners, 50, 49-51. And then very early on, it was really clear that this was not going to work. This partnership was not going to work. Um, Long
What
story.
was like, yeah, how did that
Yeah.
the reason I ask is I think these sort of details are the ones that like we don't want to throw anyone under the bus or talk
Yeah.
shit or whatever.
Right.
But at the same time, I got to tell you,
Gosh, build it.
I can count on one hand the number of partnerships
I
that own
know.
businesses that
Right.
work out. Like there are some, it does happen. It's really
Yeah.
not common.
Right. I
Yeah.
know. It's really, and so we were common. We were the basics. We had different needs and different values that hadn't been distinguished ahead of time. So for her, it
Mm,
really was um, like a project, like a side project. And so I'll have to correct myself, because though I said I didn't do it to make money, and that wasn't a consideration. I also knew that I had to pay back my loans, my personal loans, and also earn a living. So that was clear. I just didn't know, I didn't think I was gonna like make money. You know what I mean? And so she had it that she didn't want me to teach that many classes because she wanted to pay our couple of extra teachers. And so I was like nannying full time and teaching at other studios and teaching as many classes as she would let me at our studio, until finally I said, listen, we're paying other people to teach, and I need to teach more so I can pay myself more. So that was sort of the beginning of the end. And we were able to dissolve the partnership, and I was able to buy her out through a miracle, actually.
I've got to say, the stories in all entrepreneurship, but in yoga studios especially, of how people, I don't know, like the stars align for things to just happen. It's like really quite common. I can't help but think it's because of what you started this with, was like there was a gravity. I just decided I'm opening a studio, and there's no question on how I'm going to do it. Like that's just the details. It's happening.
Right.
So then things kind of work out.
Yeah.
Okay, so you dissolve the partnership. I mean, from that perspective, now in hindsight, is there any recommendations you'd make for someone who's looking at starting an entrepreneurial partnership? Like questions to ask, how to make sure you're aligned? Like how do you avoid that outcome? Sounds like it ultimately worked out the best for everyone, but in the moment, it sounds like it was tumultuous. Like how do you just dodge that in the first place?
I think you need like a prenup. I think you need to talk about the end before you begin.
Yeah.
And like, what's our exit strategy? So how does this go if it doesn't work out? And every possible scenario should get flushed out. And fine.
Yeah, I like that. Actually, just made me think of, because we brought him up already, yoga lawyer Corey. Just like he explains, the reason why you have contracts and agreements and everything else is not, and legal ones even, is not because you plan on having a legal battle. It's because they clarify the relationship, they clarify the expectations, and if it's clear, then you avoid all the shit.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so then how did you? I mean, jumping ahead, like you ultimately end up selling your studio. I want you to get to that point too. But how did you build the studio up? I mean, the way I look at it is there are some data points that would suggest when you open a business, there's an element of luck. The luck being timing the market. It's like location plus time have enormous impact on your success.
Yeah.
The people selling entrepreneurial stuff out there don't always want to say that because they're trying to sell you their programming stuff. But if those two things are there, you'll have a certain level of success. And prior to when you opened, that was the yoga world. I mean, you've opened a yoga studio in 2005. It was like a fucking license to print money if you're in a city.
Right.
You could have shit services and a stinky dank studio and whatever else. Like there was no other boutique fitness. There was nothing else like it. People came in, you charged them whatever. It was a bit ridiculous. But even where you open, like that wasn't the game anymore. You had to actually get smart with the business part. And now, as a side, 2024, I mean, holy shit. If you don't have your business stuff in order, like you're dead. Like, you got 3 years and you're gone.
That's it.
So now you have to be smart with it, but I digress. How did you, once you like had the studio fully within your reign, how did you build it up? What do you feel like was the way that you really got it cooking?
Yeah. Things really started to change when with the fallout with Bikram. And right around that time, my body was breaking down. It was like I had been solely practicing that practice for, I don't know, 13 years at that time, every day. I was one of those studio owners, and I'm still one of these yogis that I practice every day, just period. So I was in there every day, and my joints were hurting and la la la. So it was like energetically I was falling out of alignment with the enterprise of Bikram yoga, and also my body was
physically.
And physically. So I started.
Isn't that a funny coincidence or not?
Yeah, I mean, right, exactly. So so I started pursuing other modalities, and I went and did a training with Tony Sanchez. My then husband took me to the gym. He taught me how to do a push-up. I had never done a burpee. And my body started to heal. And I realized, oh, I want to bring these different practices to my students. Like, why wouldn't I share what I'm doing? So we rebranded, we added in all these other styles, and my studio just fucking blew up really fast. It was like a bit stressful. It was exciting, but also stressful.
So sorry,
Yeah.
you would say that like the addition of other products, other styles was the impetus for,
That was part of it.
I mean,
But
yeah.
yeah, that was a big part of it. And also with that, having real clarity and distinction between the styles. So I feel really proud of that, that still like the Bikram or the 26 or whatever you want to call it was still really, really clear. And then we had vinyasa and yin and bar and yoga sculpt and meditation and handstand workshops and all kinds of things. But that practice stayed really clear.
Right. It's a good point, actually. When we work on, and this would be for any business, when we work on product definition, there's sort of like 2 or 3 layers of it, right? So one would be what you're publicly projecting, like how you describe a class or how you describe a product public facing. And the big detail there being, it needs to be completely clear why you would have this product and this product. Because if there's too much overlap, then it's actually a confusion thing. So it's like, what's the purpose of this versus that?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so I resonate with what you're saying, that clarity between them, I mean, makes it more compelling, I suppose, and really then rounds out the whole business.
Absolutely. And right around then, I also attended Mind Body University and hired a consultant. And I had been doing some of those best practices. Like I knew that membership was the way. But I think I had a good intro and then a good, and then a good membership. But that was it. There was nothing, I wasn't doing anything else. So by then, like my business was fine. I think I was paying and again, I'm frugal and I'm humble. So I'm like, well, I made 14,000 like a few years ago. Like, I think I was paying myself like 40K or something. Like, it's really not. But I was like, like I just
it's all relative. It's all relative. Yeah.
It's all relative. But when I hired the consultant and I did the MBU, and I started applying what they told me, I just did what they told me to do. And I saw my numbers just in addition to adding all these other styles. By then I hired a manager, right? Because it's like, I need help and I can't, and let me just, so the business just blew up.
What were some of the things, what would you say are some of the things that you did under recommendation from the consultant or otherwise that had, other than the like adding other classes, that were like high impact?
Right. Well, I think that adding other classes was my idea, not theirs. High impact was like following the intro, following the new student, having a process, a sales process. Isn't that what we call it? Having a sales process and following the new client and giving them, just the best experience possible. And that's what happened. The conversion just took off.
Yeah.
Membership.
I always think about because we talked a little bit about like the serendipity of just, once you make a decision, things work out, whatever.
Yeah.
To me, there's a connection between that and this idea, everyone's heard the comment, you make what you measure. And without getting way like esoteric on this, you make what you measure because you're paying attention to it, therefore you take action towards it. So that's one element.
Right.
But also from like a quantum theory, as soon as you look at something, you change it. So, the intro is a good example where it's like, if you're not looking at it, it just does its thing. As soon as you look at it, even if your plan isn't the best plan, the fact that you're doing something and looking at it and measuring it, it will just improve.
Totally.
So it triggers that for me. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Jump us ahead because, I know the story a little bit, but you eventually decide to sell the studio. So like, talk to me about the decision to make that transition, other than the details first. Like, why did you end up being like, I'm going to sell the studio? Like, how did you conclude that?
Well, and I want to back up a little bit because it's a sort of like it's an overlap of where the personal meets the professional. You know what I mean?
Mm,
And maybe that's always the case. I'm not sure in other industries and businesses, but I would say yes, like wherever you go, there you are. And so you bring all your stuff. So it is the whole arc, it is a story, it's a personal story. So backing up to even how I was able to dissolve that partnership, in 2011. Um, and I said it was a miracle that I was able to buy her out. So we did mediation, and it was clear to me that I couldn't afford to buy her out.
mm.
And it was going to cost $200,000. And as I said, I had just, I crowdfunded, I didn't have the money. So I got really quiet and really peaceful with myself. And I realized I was going to have to give her the studio and she would buy me out. And then, so in mediation, we had agreed on 2 weeks for me to think about it. My accountant, who was really on my team, and she's like, I think you'd be a great candidate for an SBA, small business loan. But we crunched the numbers, and it was going to take me like 10 years to pay it back. And it would mean I would have to wait to pay back my loans and not pay and it was just like, no, I think I just need to surrender. Like, this is what's happening. And within 2 days of me needing to tell her my final decision, it had gotten ugly also. I mean, if that wasn't obvious between us. And so what happened was my grandfather dropped dead. My 96-year-old grandfather, who I know that's old, but he was healthy as an ox. He had a bruise in his leg. He went to the hospital and he never came out. And nobody
Oh.
knew, including my grandmother, that he had $1 million cash, like under his back, practically.
It,
And this was all like
wow.
within days of me needing to give her my final decision. So they ironically lived in Florida, where I am now. My studio's in Seattle. So we rushed to Florida. We brought my grandma back to Seattle to live out her days. And in that time, my mom told her the story. Well, this is what Nina's going through. And by the way, you have $1 million. Do you want to help your granddaughter? And she's like, I mean, she's just in shock, right? She just lost her husband. They've been together 75 years. Can you imagine?
Holy
And
shit.
my dad,
No.
the math teacher, draws a circle. He goes, this is the money you have, and this is the little piece that would help Nina. Just give it to her. So within days, I suddenly had the money.
Wow.
So
I mean, obviously not the way we would like to create the access to finances, but
yeah,
again, like the fact that it just works out like that.
totally. And then it
Yeah.
really did, Josh, feel like there was this kind of like energetic protection, like it was supposed to be my studio. And
Mm,
and I had this, like, the ancestors now, like, behind me, like, go baby, go. So, I mean, and
that's
really
cool.
then it just, that's when everything took off. So similarly, how then, jumping ahead, did I decide to sell my studio? Um, I, fast forward, I got married. And that was, how much do I want to say about that? That might be podcast too. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's what happened. Um, he was actually in the marijuana business. And in Seattle at that time, it was starting to crumble, starting to crash. And so my
Mm,
business was thriving and his business was, falling apart. And we were just way out of alignment with, I mean, no shade on cannabis. I just don't ingest it. I think it works great for some people. It doesn't work great for me. So I wasn't using it myself, um, which maybe is here nor there, but I had this holistic, really healthy business, is what I'm saying, like a place for people to come and be in community. And it was just like my favorite place to be. It was my favorite place to be. And then, and his business was just, yeah, like really shady, and a lot of not cool shit was
like
happening.
Yeah, and like the antithesis of the experience you're having in
That's,
yours. Yeah.
that's yeah. So we were like growing up,
Hmm.
and we ended up splitting up, and he came back to South Florida, which is where he's from. And after he left, soon thereafter, he wanted to reconcile, and it was all Seattle's was just terrible, and now he's in a better place. And I'm like, well, shit, like, this is my husband. Like, I didn't just decide to get married, one day. It's like, okay, let's see about this. So we were long distance for a year and a half, and I needed to see some things that he was handling in his own personal life and professional life. And I saw those things happening, and we would come back and forth and visit one another. And so I said, okay, I will give it a try. I'll come to South Florida. I'll give it a year. And so I got the studio ready. I put more layers of support, leadership in place.
Hmm.
I got my house rented, but I kept a room upstairs because I wasn't quite sure. I brought my dogs to South Florida, and within that year, I realized, again, wherever you go, there you are. And we still, even though he's not in the cannabis business anymore, we still have our same problems, actually.
Right.
So I decided to end the marriage and thought I would move right back to Seattle. But it was November, and I don't know if you know about the weather in the Pacific
I
Northwest.
do. I lived in Vancouver for a few
Right.
years.
Yeah, it's the same
Sister
latitude,
city.
longitude. Yeah, it's brutal.
Terrible.
Oh, and I just got back from there yesterday, and it's May, and it was 50 degrees and rainy and freezing the whole time I was there. So
Gross.
that's still true. That's still true. But anyways, I had bought a house at that time. By then in South Florida, my dogs were chilling, and the studio was kind of doing its thing. Not kind of, it was doing its own thing.
Right.
With
Without you even being there.
it was sort of
Yeah.
like by accident, we proved that, okay, like if the business requires the owner to be there and do all the things, then you don't have a business, you have a hobby.
Yeah.
And if the business can thrive without you, then you have a business. So I
Right.
kind of proved the thing without trying to. And so I thought, okay, let me just chill. This was 2019 November. Let me just chill, have the winter, and just see what happens. And then March was the pandemic. So then I really wanted to get out and sell the studio. There
Right.
had been a
Because then you
couple.
can't even travel to it at that point.
I couldn't get
Especially
there.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was really stressful. There had been a couple, there had been two, in fact, exactly two um, moments where I was going to sell it to teachers, and then that fell through. That deal fell through. And so that just tells me that it wasn't time at that time. But I did
Mm.
have the business valued during those conversations. So whatever it was, like 2 or 3 years prior. So I already had a relationship with our other friend, Mitch,
With
right?
Mitch, yeah.
Mitch, right? And so I called him up, or I sent him an email. I mean, I thought I was just going to have to close my business. It's the freaking pandemic.
Hmm.
And I thought, okay, I have 3 years left of my second 5-year lease. Like, what am I going to owe on the lease? Like, maybe I just pay and just close this thing. And he was like, are you kidding? He was so excited because he knew what this thing was. And he said, no, baby, we're going to sell this. I said, what? But it's a pandemic. He said, just come with me. I got you. I got you, boo. And he did, and we did. And that's what
So
happened.
then you sold during the pandemic, but actually we have two coaches, Coach Terry as well. She had a sale fall through, pandemic hit.
That's right.
It fell through because the
That's,
person was delaying, pandemic hit, and then they pulled the chute on her.
that's right.
And I sort of counseled her at that time, and she did end up getting it sold during the pandemic as well. Admittedly, less than she was originally hoping for, but still like very successful sale.
Yeah.
I would just say that like that's got to be the proof. We in the past, I don't hear this term anymore, but people used to talk about all the time about being recession proof, having a
Mm-hmm.
recession proof business.
Mm-hmm.
I think that product aside, the pandemic was like a super proving ground for that. If you've got a business that's actually good and functioning properly and offers value and et cetera, yeah, it was a shit show. But like if you can sell a business during that time, then that's as recession proof as you get, and get an actual multiple. So That's a huge, it's huge proof, huge testament that like it was really a business separate from you and doing its own thing as it's supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like
Yeah.
circling back to that thing of like, hiring out and creating leaders. And so then like, it's not about me. It's not the Nina show. It's
Yeah.
the studio is its own life force. It's its own organism. It's its own
Yeah.
entity. And it's its own like personality. And
Totally.
and it still is. It still is 4 years later.
Well, I was going to say the new owner of the studio has a manager in place who then does consulting with us as well. And they're crushing it. They're still cooking. And they're opening a second location this year.
Yeah.
So,
They're more than
you said
cooking.
that, yeah,
Yeah.
they are definitely they're definitely more than cooking.
Yeah.
But,
My
that's
mom
from that
actually,
foundation.
she recently asked, do you have seller's remorse? And I said, no, because for one, like I really, and I'm not just saying this, I don't live in regret. I don't think it's useful. But
No,
also, there's no the who's telling that how would we know that I would have taken it to the
right.
level taken it? I mean, where they took it beyond my wildest dreams, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well,
hats
I
off.
want to talk a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about that, and then now you coming on as a coach
Yeah.
with us and everything too, because the comment that I hear very commonly, and I find it fascinating because personally, I haven't like I relate to it, but it's never been a barrier for me. Whereas for other people, it's a barrier. The comment is, I'd maybe sell it, but like I don't know what I would do next. And that thought actually stops people from when they're like realizing that they're at a peak. Maybe they
Yeah.
have a buyer lined up. Like it's a good time
Yeah.
to unload because you have opportunity for it, and they don't. And I've seen it multiple times where we get a really solid offer on a studio out of nowhere. The owner's like, I don't know what I would do without the studio. They don't sell it. And then now they want to sell and they can't. Like now they're stuck.
I can re
So
I can relate to that question. What would I do?
yeah.
Still trying to figure that out. Well, now I'm coaching, so I get to sink my teeth into this new identity. But it has been a bit of a wandering and not so comfortable the last 4 years, like trying to
Sure.
find a new identity as not a studio owner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that yoga studio is a good example of how, although you're not the business, at the same time, like you're so emotionally, mentally invested in it. So, I mean, obviously, you're already a great coach, and I can only see you going up from here. And you have so much direct experience with this. It's going to be exciting. Talk to me a little bit. I want to make this comment though too. A yoga studio, and a lot of small businesses are like this, but yoga studios, in my mind, are maybe the best example I could possibly think of. That if you own one and you win, like you get it right, you learn what you need to learn, you figure out all the et cetera, and it really does well for you. It might not be the fastest way for you to make your first 100 million. On
Mm.
the other hand, it's one of the most powerful ways for you to acquire all of the skills, knowledge, grit, understanding of business on the whole that whatever you do next can get you there potentially, or at least like clarify where you should go next. So,
Right.
yeah.
Oh my God, I learned so much, so much.
So talk to
Interpersonal.
me. Yeah, 100%. Talk to me about yoga business coaching and business coaching in general. And like, because I see a thread here, it's like, why do I want to open a studio? I want to make this impact. I've got to do it, whatever. You
Mhm.
kind of just reached out off the cuff and were like, hey, like, I want to do this. So we
Yeah.
put you into our program.
Yeah.
Like, what is it about coaching and what's inspiring you now and where are you going next?
Well, I mean, I want to help people. And it's like if I have a thing and I know it works, I want other people to do it. It's simple,
Yeah.
and so many of us, and I'll say us, yoga studio owners, whether former or current, we're going through the same shit. There's some
Mhm.
threads that are just like across the board. Just we're all kind of facing the same questions, problems, which could be opportunities. And it's like these are my people. I know
Yeah.
I know I know what you're going through. And I want to help you. You want to be helped. So I mean, I don't know, not very poetic, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I mean, it's just sometimes the simple answer is the right answer. I relate to what you're saying too. For me, I'd been hired to train some sales teams while we still owned our last studio. But then once we sold our studio and we're traveling full time,
Yeah.
I kind of just thought that, like, I knew there were some studios that were struggling out there, or studios that were, like, making it but not like totally crushing it. I knew that that was a thing, but I kind of just thought that that was the anomaly. That was
Right.
like crazy studios or bad markets or something like that. I thought everyone had our experiences. Like, we made lots of money, it bought us everything we wanted to do, supported the family, whatever, whatever. We sold for profit. I'm like, that's how you run a yoga studio.
Right. Isn't that what everyone's
Uh,
saying?
right. Isn't that everyone's experience? And it became very clear very quickly that it absolutely wasn't. And it
Absolutely.
became very obvious that there was no reason for that, actually. It wasn't because, like, some
Magical thinking.
negative thing, magic. Yeah. Like, it was like
Hmm.
they're just missing. So
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, that was like, I wanted to help them, but then also I can't help but think about this ripple effect that, like, across the United States, there's
Hmm.
10,000 studios, let's say. We at all boutique fitness, we're in the tens of or hundreds of thousands now. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think people do yoga 5 days a week and go home and be a total asshole. Like, I think it really does legitimately have positive impact in the world.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
how do you see your coaching with your clients and that sort of impact connection? Like, you want to help people, but why? What's the bigger impact that you're looking at?
Yeah. Well, I mean, coming back to that, my calling, all beings are free. It's like that has to include me. And,
Mhm.
honestly, when I was in studio ownership, there were a lot of it I did not feel free. I felt really,
Mm.
really dominated. I mean, I loved my business, but I felt dominated by it. I felt this immense pressure. Um, Even when we were doing really, really well, financially, like finances aside, I just felt this enormous pressure. And I want to help studio owners have a sense of freedom if I can.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you're saying. I think that, especially in the yoga world, like, there's a lot of bigger worldly impact stuff that we talk about, which is important. But in the end, one of the things that yoga has really taught me is just that idea of, like, you put your mask on first when you're on the airplane, kind of thing. It's like the one thing you have control over is yourself.
Right.
And so, by extension, from a coaching perspective, it's like helping the individual find that ethically affluent lifestyle,
Right.
feel empowered and free in their business. Like, that's
Yeah.
how they then have the inspiration and power to keep passing that down the line. And as you said earlier, real leaders create leaders.
Right. That's right.
They get to, you lead them, and then they lead their community, and so on and so forth. So,
Right. And
yeah.
I mean, it's really true. Like stepping away from my business physically and moving across the country was the best thing I could have done for my business and for myself.
Hmm.
Having that physical
Yeah.
distance, the business just kept growing, and then I got to figure out, you know, and I'm still figuring, okay, who am I without this identity? And
Yeah. I like it. So then, how do you? I got two last questions as we're coming towards the end of time here. So, for someone who is making decisions that are high impact in their business, like the decision to be like, I'm going to move across the country, and, like, actually, quite literally in your case, I think that might be the farthest possible distance you could go and stay inside the United States.
for sure.
Trying to think if Alaska or Hawaii would be further. No, no way. South Florida to Seattle, like,
Right.
that's the longest possible line. So, I mean, that must have been scary, but how do you, if someone's making a decision that's that monumental in their business and that kind of impact, like, I don't know, do you have any recommendations on how you do that? How do you approach that decision?
Yeah. I
Do you
mean,
just do it? Like, what is
no,
that?
I didn't just do it. I really didn't just do it. I mapped it out. It's like I had a coach, I had a therapist, I had a spiritual mentor. It's like I had a whole council, the
Mm-hmm.
friends, the homies, my family. And it was not a decision that I made lightly or overnight. I really, really, really carefully um, put steps in place and made sure to yeah, it was an incredibly thoughtful and thought out decision. And even then I knew I was taking a risk because it's like I don't know if this is going to work
Sure.
out. But if it doesn't work out, then it'll just be the next thing.
Right. Like you were already owning that potential either way.
This is an adventure. Life is a
Yeah.
series of
I like
experiences.
it.
So let's have another one.
Well, Nina, we're coming towards the end of time here. I mean, the last couple of questions, that come to mind for me is what is, you've been an entrepreneur and had a lot of direct success and experience in obviously the yoga world, but as an entrepreneur for years at this point. What's a belief or a viewpoint or a high impact thing you've learned that you feel like is either controversial or people like don't see it, or it's like not understood?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it really does have to do with the being, the who we're being,
Mm,
and that, in yoga, we know that we can't separate and we don't separate the body and the mind, that they are distinct and yet they're impacting each other greatly. And so same is true with business and personal development. I believe like we're bringing our being into each arena. And
totally.
so if we're not handling our inner game and the business, it's going to trigger us. It's all going to trigger. It's all here to trigger us. So we can look at it. And, that's another thing one of my mentors says is that we get into relationships, like even this is a relationship. We get into relationships with people or experiences to trigger us to have the breakthrough that we're ready to have.
Mm,
And if we don't have the breakthrough, then we're going to find another person or experience to trigger it, to just continue to trigger us.
yeah,
That's kind of
I
what I'm.
like that. I like that a lot. The ownership, the being, I mean, you're right. We often hear and talk about like you're not your business and there's a separation, and that's
Right.
true.
Right.
And people always talk about like keep your business and your personal separate, and practically, yes. And
Right. Can we
it's
really?
not possible.
Right.
Like, can you actually completely just draw the
Right.
line?
Right. It's
I
a
don't think
business
so.
of people,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
people in that business.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I got to say, I wish that I could do that. I wish I could just
Right.
be like, it's 5 o'clock, meh, gone out of my
Right. Right.
brain.
Right. Right. And if that were true, it might be a really different business with less impact. Who
That's
really
very
knows?
true.
You know?
That's very true. Yeah. All right.
But
Well, that's it for today. Nia, thanks for coming on. For any of you listening to this, if you want to talk with Nina, actually, we'll put the link down below afterwards. You can do a free coaching call. It's just to jump on with Nina and or myself, talk about your business, talk about any difficulties, identify, what are the big dominoes for you to maybe push over in the next little bit. And if you want to find Nina otherwise, you can look up the yogapreneurcollective.com, and Nina's right there with us to come and chat. Nina, thanks so much.
oh,
Really appreciate you coming
grateful.
on.
Thanks for having me. What a fun conversation.